Welcome to FlyEaglesFly News, where Eagles fans get the latest, fastest, and hottest updates. Hit subscribe and fly high with us. The rumor started to circulate in that familiar underground way that only big matchups create. Whispered in locker room hallways, hinted at in half smiles during media scrums, and amplified by fans who swear they heard something they probably were not meant to hear. The story goes that Nick Bosa, the relentless defensive force from San Francisco, let his confidence speak louder than usual when talking about Philadelphia, not in an official statement, not on a podium, but in those moments when cameras are far and egos are close. According to the speculation, Bosa believed the Eagles' attack was impressive on the surface, but predictable underneath. A system that could be cracked with discipline and brute strength. That kind of talk travels fast, especially when it involves a franchise like the Eagles, a team that prides itself on physical dominance and mental toughness. Fans began to spin the idea that Bosa saw Philadelphia as overhyped, a machine built on reputation rather than substance. Whether he truly said it or not almost became irrelevant, because the rumor itself gained a life of its own. In the world of professional football, perception is often more powerful than truth. This supposed provocation painted Bosa as the antagonist in a story that Eagles supporters were more than happy to embrace. They saw it as disrespect, as fuel, as the kind of spark that turns an already intense clash into something personal. And as the whispers grew louder, all eyes naturally turned to the leader of Philadelphia, the man expected to respond not with words but with presence, Jalen Hurts. According to those close to the situation, heard the noise long before it reached the public. The speculation suggests that he did not react with anger or public defiance, but with a calm intensity that made an even stronger statement. Teammates allegedly noticed a shift in his demeanor, not dramatic, not theatrical, but sharper, more focused. Hurts has always been known as a quarterback who leads by example, and this moment fit perfectly into that narrative. Instead of firing back at Bosa through the media, the rumor says Hurts addressed the team privately, reminding them who they were and what they represented. He reportedly spoke about respect being earned on the field, about preparation being the ultimate response to doubt. Those who claim to have witnessed that speech describe it as quiet but powerful, the kind of message that sinks in slowly and stays there. Hurts allegedly emphasized that the Eagles did not need validation from opponents because their identity was built through work, not words. This alleged moment became legendary before anything had even happened, because it reinforced the idea of Hurts as a composed leader, someone who turns provocation into purpose. In this version of events, Bosa's rumored comments were not an insult, but an opportunity, a chance for Hurts to reinforce unity and belief. It painted a picture of the stars approaching the same moment from completely different angles, one loud in confidence, the other silent in conviction. As the speculation continued to grow, analysts and fans alike began framing the matchup as more than just a clash of talent. The Eagles were increasingly described as the superior overall unit, deeper, more balanced, and more adaptable than the 49ers. This belief was not tied to a single play or a single matchup, but to a broader sense that Philadelphia had built something more complete. Rumors suggested that inside the Eagles camp, there was a quiet confidence bordering on inevitability, a feeling that they could adjust to anything thrown at them. The talk around Nick Bosa, whether fair or exaggerated, only strengthened that internal belief. People close to the team claimed that the Eagles saw San Francisco as formidable but limited, a team reliant on individual brilliance rather than collective dominance. In contrast, Philadelphia was portrayed as a machine where every part amplified the others. This narrative fueled the idea that even a player as disruptive as Bosa could be neutralized by scheme, patience, and depth. The speculation framed the Eagles as mentally ahead, already playing chess while their opponent was still flexing muscles. It was not about dismissing San Francisco, but about believing that Philadelphia had reached a level where confidence came naturally. This sense of superiority, whispered rather than shouted, added another layer to the story, making the rumored provocation feel like a miscalculation. What made the story even more compelling was the way it aligned with Jalen Hurts' personal journey, at least in the eyes of those telling it. Hurts has long been viewed as someone who thrives when doubted, when underestimated, when challenged by external voices. The rumor mill suggested that he welcomed Bosa's supposed comments not as disrespect, but as confirmation that the Eagles were being taken seriously. There is a certain power in knowing an opponent feels the need to talk you down. According to speculation, Hurts used that energy to sharpen his focus, To demand precision from himself and his teammates, he allegedly reinforced the idea that greatness is quiet, that real confidence does not need an audience. This approach contrasted sharply with the image of Bosa as a vocal, emotional competitor. Feeding off confrontation, fans began to frame Hurts as the embodiment of Philadelphia's mindset. Calm on the surface, relentless underneath. In this narrative, the quarterback's response before the game became the real story, overshadowing whatever was or was not said by the defender. It was described as an epic lesson, not delivered through insults or bravado, but through preparation and leadership. Whether this moment truly happened exactly as described did not matter, because it fit perfectly into the mythology surrounding Hurts and the Eagles. The idea that the Eagles were far superior to the 49ers continued to gain traction. As the rumor evolved, supporters pointed to depth, versatility, and an almost ruthless efficiency that defined Philadelphia's identity. The speculation suggested that this superiority was felt not just physically, but psychologically. The Eagles were portrayed as a team comfortable with expectations, comfortable with pressure, and comfortable being the standard others measured themselves against. In contrast, San Francisco was depicted as talented but reactive, driven by emotion and individual matchups. The alleged comments from Bosa, whether real or imagined, were framed as evidence of that emotional approach. In this version of the story, Philadelphia did not need to provoke, because they believed their presence alone was enough. Hurts, as the central figure, symbolized that belief. He was rumored to have reminded his teammates that talking before the game was meaningless, that the real conversation would happen through execution. This narrative resonated deeply with fans who wanted to see their team viewed as the mature, dominant force in the league. It transformed a simple pregame rumor into a statement about identity and culture, elevating the stakes without revealing anything concrete. By the time the story reached its peak, it no longer mattered whether Nick Bosa truly intended to provoke or whether his words were taken out of context. The speculation had already achieved its purpose, creating a dramatic contrast between two approaches to competition. On one side, a feared defender known for intensity and swagger. On the other, a quarterback defined by composure and quiet authority. The Eagles, in this telling, stood taller not because they talked more, but because they listened, prepared, and believed. Jalen Hurts' alleged response before the game became a symbol of that philosophy, an epic lesson delivered without a microphone. Fans embraced the idea that Philadelphia was not just better on paper, but stronger in mindset, more united, and more disciplined. This rumor-fueled narrative added richness to the matchup, turning it into a story about respect, leadership, and the subtle ways teams assert dominance. Whether fact or fiction, it captured the imagination, reminding everyone that in football, the battles before the game can be just as fascinating as the ones that follow. The second wave of speculation pushed the narrative even further, suggesting that inside the Eagles' locker room, the name Nick Bosa was never mentioned again after that initial moment. According to the rumor, Jalen Hurts deliberately avoided turning one player into the focal point, reinforcing the idea that the 49ers were a collective challenge, not a single obstacle. This approach supposedly frustrated those who expected a more emotional response, but it perfectly matched Hurts' leadership style. He was said to have emphasized control, discipline, and patience, traits that defined Philadelphia's preparation. The Eagles, in this version of events, were portrayed as a team that thrived on structure rather than chaos. While outside voices dissected Bosa's supposed comments, inside the building the focus remained internal. This contrast fueled the belief that Philadelphia was operating on a higher level, unaffected by noise and speculation. Fans latched onto the idea that ignoring provocation was itself a statement of superiority. It suggested a team so confident in its identity that it did not need external validation or confrontation. The rumor painted a picture of calm intensity, of a group locked in on a shared goal, unconcerned with individual rivalries. This reinforced the growing perception that the Eagles were not just physically dominant, but mentally untouchable. As the story evolved, commentators began to speculate about how this mindset might impact the way the Eagles approached the challenge as a whole. The belief that Philadelphia was far superior to San Francisco was no longer just about talent, but about adaptability and intelligence. The rumor suggested that the Eagles saw multiple paths to control the game, while the 49ers were viewed as more rigid. This perception placed even more weight on Jalen Hurts as a strategic leader, someone capable of reading situations and adjusting on the fly. The alleged lesson he delivered before the game was framed as a reminder That football is as much about thinking as it is about hitting. Fans imagine Hurts calmly breaking down scenarios, emphasizing patience against aggression. In contrast, Nick Bosa was cast as the embodiment of raw force. Dangerous but potentially exploitable. This speculative framing elevated the Eagles' quarterback to almost philosophical status. A thinker among warriors, whether fair or not. It fed into the mythos surrounding Philadelphia's dominance. The Eagles were no longer just better. They were smarter, more composed, and more complete. This narrative resonated deeply with a fan base eager to see its team recognized as the standard everyone else chased. The rumor also highlighted the emotional contrast between the two franchises. San Francisco was portrayed as a team fueled by edge and defiance, while Philadelphia was depicted as grounded and purposeful. This dichotomy made the alleged provocation by Bosa feel like a misstep, an emotional spark thrown into a fire that only burned brighter in silence. Jalen Hurts' response, as described by those spreading the story, was almost ceremonial in its restraint. He was rumored to have reminded his teammates that respect is not demanded, it is demonstrated. This idea became central to the narrative, transforming a simple pre-game exchange into a moral lesson. Fans and analysts alike speculated that this approach gave the Eagles an intangible advantage, a clarity that allowed them to operate without distraction. The belief that Philadelphia was far superior to the 49ers was now rooted in character as much as capability. It suggested that when pressure mounted, the Eagles would remain steady, while others might waver. This framing added depth to the rivalry, making it about values and leadership, rather than just matchups and schemes. FlyEaglesFly News. Family smash subscribe and hit like. Your support keeps the freshest Philadelphia Eagles updates flying in. Drop your take in the comments and let's talk birds. Another layer of speculation focused on how this rumored dynamic might be perceived by the rest of the league. The Eagles were increasingly seen as a team that did not need to announce its presence, because everyone already felt it. The idea that Nick Bosa felt compelled to comment was interpreted by some as acknowledgement of Philadelphia's status in this version of events. Jalen Hurts' calm response before the game was not just for his teammates, but a message to the entire football world. It said that the Eagles were comfortable being the target, comfortable being doubted, and comfortable being talked about. This comfort was framed as a sign of true dominance. Fans embraced the idea that their team had reached a point where others reacted to them, not the other way around. The rumor turned Hurts into a symbol of that confidence, a leader who understood that silence could be louder than words. It reinforced the belief that Philadelphia's superiority was not accidental, but carefully cultivated through culture and consistency. As the narrative continued to circulate, it became clear that the story had transcended the individuals involved. Nick Bosa was no longer just a defender, and Jalen Hurts was no longer just a quarterback. They became archetypes, representing the philosophies of competition. The Eagles, through Hurts, were portrayed as methodical, composed, and quietly ruthless. The 49ers, through Bosa, were seen as passionate, aggressive, and emotionally driven. This contrast made the rumored pre-game lesson feel inevitable, almost scripted by the logic of storytelling. Fans did not need confirmation, because the story fit too well. It reinforced existing beliefs about both teams and amplified the sense that Philadelphia held the upper hand. The idea that the Eagles were far superior to San Francisco was now embedded in a narrative of leadership and restraint. Whether reality matched this story was almost beside the point. The rumor had already shaped perception, and perception in sports can be incredibly powerful in the end. This speculative tale served as a reminder of why football narratives captivate so deeply. A single rumored comment, a single alleged speech, became the foundation for a story about dominance, respect, and identity. Nick Bosa's supposed provocation and Jalen Hurts' rumored response before the game created a dramatic arc that fans could latch onto. It painted the Eagles as a team that did not need to shout to be heard, a team whose confidence was rooted in preparation and unity. The belief that Philadelphia was much superior to the 49ers became a central theme, reinforced by every retelling of the story. This was not about facts or confirmation, but about belief and symbolism. In that sense, the rumor achieved something powerful. It turned anticipation into conviction, and it transformed a matchup into a narrative lesson about how true leaders respond when challenged. That's a wrap from FlyEaglesFly News. If you want the fastest Eagles updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Sound off in the comments. Let's talk birds.